Hello, I'm Janna, and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today, I just got my new distress glazes in, so of course, it is time to have a good play with them. We're going to be doing some swatches and going through a few of my favorite distress glaze techniques. If you'd like to see exactly which supplies we're going to be using, go ahead and pause here. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. So I just recently got my hands on the brand new Tim Holtz Distress Glazes, and I gotta say, they are beautiful. So the new colors include dried marigold, mustard seed. I've gotta say, I've been waiting for this one quite a bit. Mustard seed is my go-to yellow for pretty much any time I want that color. So super happy to see that. Frayed burlap, a wonderful neutral. Shaded lilac. I am thrilled to see this one. It is one of my favorite colors, and it's really perfect for the Halloween season because I am thinking spooky ghosts. Then we have a lovely blue. This is tumbled glass. That's going to be a beautiful pale blue. And our last one is evergreen bough, and that is a wonderful green. So these are the brand new colors of distress. Very excited. Now, the first thing we have to do is swatch them out. So we're going to be pulling in a piece of distress white heavy stock, and I also have my distress embossing dabber. This is going to allow me to put small amounts of each of the glaze down, and I'll be able to emboss them, and I'll be able to take my 1-inch circle hole punch and label the top of each of my jars, which is my preferred method for labeling distress. So we're going to do 2 of these together in real time, and then I'll put the others on fast forward. Let's start right down the line. I'm just going to set these over here. I'm kind of going in rainbow order. So we'll start with the dried marigold. Let's go ahead, carefully open that. As you can see, I haven't even opened these yet. Ooh, such a gorgeous color. All right, so with the distress embossing dabber, we're just going to rub some of that right onto the paper. Now, with the distress embossing dabber, when you tilt this in the light, you'll be able to see that there is a shine. If you have a shine, then that means that we have got ink. If there's no shine, then that means we need to add more. But we've got pretty good shine except in the middle. So I'm just going to put down just a little bit more. And now we're going to add our glaze on top. But I want to slip a piece of scrap paper under it first. So there we go. And now I'll just pour that right on, and the rest can go straight back into the jar. Nice and easy. So there we go. That will work out quite nicely. And we'll just take that, dump that right back in. Great. And we'll do the same thing again. I'm going to take the embossing dabber, put that down, make a nice big circle. It's looking really good. Okay. And we'll go in with our next color, which is going to be the mustard seed. Now, with the glazes, the powder gives you a relatively good idea of how this is going to look, but the heat is going to transform these. Some of these look more concentrated when they are in the powdered state, like the mustard seed. This is not how mustard seed is going to look on paper, and it's definitely not how the ink looks when you put it down. So I'm guessing this is pretty concentrated, and we're going to see a big difference once I add the heat to this. So go, give that a quick tap, and dump that right back into the jar. So I'm going to put this on a much lower volume as we start to emboss, and I wanted to emboss for the first time in real time. So we're grabbing the embossing gun. there we go. We have our first two colors embossed. Let's take a closer look. So as you can see, the dried marigold lightened quite a bit once we added heat to it. And if we look at the mustard seed, this now looks like what I'd expect mustard seed to look like. But as you can see in the jar, it looks way more orange. So by adding the heat and melting it out, the true color of each of the glazes is going to be revealed, which is why it is so important to swatch these so that you know exactly what color you have. Because if you just look at this, I'd be almost thinking like, oh, hey, that's a great pumpkin yellow. But honestly, that's more like a peach Bellini and something I might want to put on a flower. Maybe an accent for a pumpkin, but it's not like really pumpkin orange, as the jar would lead you to believe. So swatching is super important. Let's go ahead and put the rest of this on fast forward as we do the remaining 4 swatches, and then we'll start punching these out. Here are the finished embossed glazes, and I am so thrilled with those colors. Those are going to be a fantastic addition to the current glazes that we have. So let's go ahead and start punching these out. Just want to make sure that everything is centered and looks good. Then I'm just going to give this a really good squeeze. There we go, that popped out. And now I'm just going to start lining these up with their jars. So there we go. I'm just going to punch these out. Let's see here. Now we've got the yellow. Okay. And the blue. Now I've got the shaded lilac. Good. And one more for the frayed burlap. There we go. Good. Now that I have everything ready, I'm just going to grab some collage medium and we'll start gluing these. Now, when using distressed glaze, if you're not careful, your entire glass mat is going to end up very, very sandy. And one of the best ways to get the grit off is with a swifter piece of fabric. Swifter works really well. I don't have a lot of glaze, so I'm just using my hand to brush it off, but best tip I've heard is Swifter really can lock away all of the glaze if you have got it on your work surface. But mine's not too bad, so I can get away with just brushing it off with my hand. All right, well, let's go ahead and glue these on. I've got collage medium ready. I'm just going to put a little bit on the back and stick that right down. There we go. And now I'm going to know exactly what everything is, and it'll be super easy to find when I want to create with glazes. So just do that, set off to the side, and add more glue. That is going to be so good. There. And I just love that because now I know exactly what color I'm looking at because I can tell at a glance. Okay, now for the evergreen bough. Good. And collage medium drying time, it's going to vary depending on where you're from. I'm not using a whole lot, so I'm guessing that these will be quite dry within 10 minutes or less. And now that it is getting colder, the heating system has been running more. That means the temperatures are changing, so drying time has switched on me again. Now, the first thing we're going to do is take our substrate, which is a mixed media piece of distressed cardstock, and we're going to be doing one of my favorite Tim Holtz techniques. This is for a glazed and grungy background. The colors that we're going to be using are going to include spiced marmalade and mustard seed. So the very first thing I'm doing is taking my embossing dabber and smushing that all over my piece of cardstock. I want this coated very well because we're going to be adding lots of glaze to it. So I'm just pushing and wiping the embossing ink all over the background. I'm trying to be really thorough. When in doubt, tip your paper into the light so that you can see a sheen of ink. If you've got a sheen of ink, that means you've got ink and should be good for embossing. If you're seeing lots of non-shiny areas, then I suggest going back and reapplying with more embossing ink. So, looks like we've almost got this completely ready, and then we'll be able to start adding our glazes. Now that we've got all of our ink in place, it's time to start adding the glazes. And of course, I'm putting down a drop piece of paper first. So we're going to go ahead and open up our jars. I will be starting with the mustard seed, and we're going to start sprinkling that onto our paper. So I'm just going to take a pretty generous pinch, and then I'm going to be doing a bit of a pinch and a twist as we sprinkle this all over. I'm kind of thinking that I'd like to make a fun background that I could die cut pumpkins out of. So I want some highlights and lowlights using the mustard seed and the spice marmalade to give me more texture. Okay, that's our first layer. Now let's go in with that beautiful spiced marmalade. And again, we're just going to pinch and twist. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to dump it because we already got our little bits of mustard seed in there, which will act as gorgeous accents. So we can just go ahead and dump that, and we can add all that extra right back into the jar. Okay, that is definitely covered. So let's pick up our excess and gently tap that right back into the jar. Now that we're pouring all of the glaze back into the jar, we're going to get ready to start flicking. The idea is to get rid of some of the embossing powder because we want splotchy spots left behind that will then be filled in with distressed crayon. So I'm giving the back of my substrate a pretty substantial flick to get that really patchy look going. So not flicking hard enough yet. I've still got a lot of solid orange. So just need to keep going until we start seeing splotches. Then we'll know we're all good. Getting there. So let's try that again a few more times. Okay, there we go. I'm starting to see a lot more white. That's exactly what I'm going for. So next I'm just going to take my finger and dab off a few spots because I really want there to be lots of patches. And this is going to look so grungy good once we add the distress crayon over the top. Now let's go ahead and take care of all of that extra glaze. Now I really do recommend using a much larger piece of paper to cover your work area because that left my desk kind of like a beach, but not a terrible deal because I can always clean that up with a swifter piece of fabric. Now to emboss. Here are the finished embossing results. And as you can see, we've got some definite open spots. So the next thing we're going to do is grab our sprayer and some distress crayon. I like using the darker colors. Today we're going to be using Scorched Timber. So I'm going to be scribbling directly onto the glaze. And then I'm going to dip my fingers in the water half off to the side and smush that out. I want to push all of that distress crayon into the texture of the embossing powder and into those empty white spots where I know the crayon is going to grab a hold of the substrate. So as you can see, we've got some of that really pretty color smushed in here. And this is looking very, very fall. Kind of thinking that I really want to make some pumpkins out of this. Maybe I'll do some die cutting. So as I'm cleaning up the paper, you can see that there's a lot of distressed crayon left behind. If you wanted more grunge from your distressed crayon, then I don't recommend wiping it off. But I wanted to be able to see the lovely oranges and the grunge. Next, we're going to be diving into one of my favorite Tim Holtz techniques. This is going to involve distress glazes and stenciling. So what I have here is a piece of mixed media cardstock. My favorite stencil, this is THS032. I'm going to put that over here. No, right here because I kind of want to do something with a washi tape down the side. And we've got some Crackle paste. So let's just bring this into frame. There we go. Hopefully my rubber bands are going to come in soon. The tip during the holiday hoopla for Halloween was super useful. Rubber bands to keep these sealed and fresh instead of press and seal. Love the press and seal, but anything that keeps these fresh is going to be a win. So let's take that off. We'll grab our palette knife, and I'm just going to completely cover the stencil. I want everything covered, and I want to be able to see as much of the glaze as possible. So we're just going to go through the entire stencil and see what we get. Okay, so just running that down. This is Distress Crackle Opaque. So I'm hoping that we're going to see a lovely crackle with this. That's going to get us that really cool kind of shattered pottery look, which is really neat. If we wanted more like a stained glass, then I would use the clear crackle. But right now, I want this one. Good. So we're just going to carefully scrape the extra back into the jar. There we go. And close the jar up right away, and I'm going to give it a tap. Good. All sealed. Now I'm going to very carefully lift the stencil off, make sure that I don't smudge anything, and then I will need to clean my stencil right away. So I like to lift starting at the top and then carefully peel that up. There we go. And that looks great. Oh, I'm going to have to put glaze on immediately. I forgot about that, but that's okay. And I want to do the tumbled glass and the shaded lilac. Those two are going to look fantastic. Oh, you know what? I want to do some of the mustard seed. This could be like really, really fall-like. All right, so we're going to use 4 of the glazes. I've got the mustard seed, the evergreen bough, the tumbled glass, and the shaded lilac. I'm going to go sparingly with the shaded lilac. I just want a little bit as an accent here and there. All right, I'm going to have to work fairly quickly. And a dash of the tumbled glass. Excellent. And we want lots of the mustard seed. Now I can't save any of the glaze. This is going to end up being a party mix, and there's no salvaging this once the stuff starts to get mixed, but that's okay. This is intentional, and I will survive. So I'm just going to keep sprinkling that on. Ooh, this is going to look great. I'm kind of getting pumpkin patch vibes out of this. But we shall see what we get. Okay. There. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to do the thing with the tapping on the back. Just getting that to move around, making sure that everything gets covered. Okay. That is looking good. I see a couple spots I can touch up, and I'm going to go in with the blue. Let's check back on our Crackle background. So the Crackle paste is now has the time to dry, and as you can see, we've got some fantastic crackle going on here. Now, this was done with Distress Glaze over the top of wet Crackle paste, and now we get to emboss this. So I'm going to do this in real time, and we're going to turn the volume down here as I bring in the embossing gun. here we are with the Melted Distress Glaze. Now, that is just really neat. I totally agree that this does look like shattered glass. It's really neat. I love the color, love the crackle. Now, just for fun, I'm thinking we're going to add some more color to this background just to finish this look up. And for that, I'm going to be pulling in some Distress Spray Stain. For the color that I want to use, I'm kind of leaning towards either a green or a purple. Ooh, you know what? If I've got peacock feathers, that'd be great. Let's see here. Yes, we've got peacock feathers. So I'm just going to take the sprayer and then a light bit of spray. Shouldn't take much. There we go. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more water to spread that around just a bit. Great. So we'll be back in just a moment after I've had a chance to dry this off. And here is the background complete with the added distress spray. So for the distress spray stain, we ended up using some peacock feathers, and I love how the mustard seed goes with the peacock feathers. So that's another background done. Let's head on to our next technique. For our next technique, we're going to be playing with some 3D embossing folders. We've got Acorn and Damask. So these are by Sizzix and Holtz, and we're going to be embossing some paper and then glazing it for some beautiful texture. So I've already pre-embossed my 2 pieces of paper. I'm using some of the Distress Mixed Media, and we're going to be adding all sorts of color to this. Now, my favorite way to add color is with the Distress Embossing Dabber. It's the easiest to apply and probably the least messy. So we're just going to put our paper down, and I'm going to take the embossing dabber and I'm going to run that all over the piece of paper. I'm currently just doing some soft circular motions and a few zigzags and turning my paper at different angles to make sure that I get really good coverage. For this particular design, I want all of it to be glazed. So I'm trying to be really thorough as I apply that embossing ink. Other times I might not be as thorough because I might want to grunge up the spaces that don't get glaze. But in this case, I'm hoping to get something that looks really ceramic when we're all done. So just continuing to move the dabber all around, getting our good coverage. And to make sure that we do have ink on our paper, I will be picking this up and giving it a good tilt to make sure that I see a definite shine. If there is no shine, then there is no ink. So picking that up, tilting, and yes, we've got really good shine everywhere. So that means it's time to add the embossing powder. For powders, we're going to be using some shaded lilac and some of the beautiful tumbled glass. I thought these would make a wonderful color combination. Now, I know it's technically Halloween time, but I couldn't resist these two together because it's going to give us a wonderfully icy background. So we're just going to be pinching and twisting and sprinkling this all over our paper. No rhyme or reason. I'm not trying to paint. I'm not trying to get specific details in a certain color. I just want color on here. There we go. So we'll just keep sprinkling until we have really good coverage, and then I can tap the back of the paper to move some of the extra powder around. That way, we'll make sure that everything gets a good coating of glaze. So I'm just gently tapping the back, moving things around, and that's going to tell me about how much more glaze I need to add. As you can tell, the majority of the glaze that we've added stuck because we have very little spillover onto our scrap piece of paper. So I'm just going back and adding more glaze here and there, and hopefully we're going to get a really cool pattern. Okay, probably just need a little bit more, and we're going to be good. Can't wait to emboss this. Okay, so just pick that up, give it a good tap, move the powder around. There, I think we're good. So just going to dump the party mix. I'm not planning on saving it. And we will set aside the background. Now it is time to grab the embossing gun and see what we get. So I have the embossing gun ready to go. And we're just going to start in one corner and blast the heat. And you'll be able to tell as the powder starts turning more shiny that we have enough heat to get the glaze moving. And I'm just going to slowly work my way around the card base, just kind of keeping an eye on where my fingers are, turning it so I don't accidentally cook my fingers. If you're worried about the extra heat from the embossing gun, you could always use tweezers or those nifty little hand grabbers that Ranger has. Those are good ways to save your fingers if you are slightly sensitive to the heat. Me, I just keep my fingers out of the way and rotate the card. This is looking good. I am liking the gloss that we're getting, and the colors are beautiful. That is looking so icy. Just what I was going for. And then, of course, we have the fantastic texture of the 3D folder on here, which just adds to the coolness of all of the design. All right, almost done. Just getting this last corner, and we'll be able to take a closer look at the finished result. All right, and we are done embossing. Let's take a closer look. Ooh, there we go. That is nice and shiny. We've got our beautiful colors. We use shaded lilac and tumbled glass. Now, I do want to make that texture pop just a little bit more, so I'm going to be pulling in a distress crayon, and this is one of the mica crayons, and I chose Wonderland. It's a beautiful icy color, and we're just going to scribble that down over the top of all that wonderful texture, and then we're just going to smush. So with the crayon, I'm just trying to get all of those high points in the embossing, and hopefully that's going to bring out those details. Now we're just smushing that out. There we go. Ooh, you can definitely see where the crayon is catching. Definitely some of the highs and the lows, which is just what I was going for. So I'll just continue to smush that until we're thoroughly blended. If you didn't want to use your fingers, I highly recommend using the Tim Holtz brush. Now this is the silver one where you can pull the collar up or down on it, and that allows you to control how much brush you're using. So if you don't like getting stuff on your fingers, that would be the right tool for you. But I don't mind getting the crayon on my fingers. I can always spray them off later with the distress sprayer. And I've always got a cloth right next to me for cleaning purposes. Okay, just a little bit more here and there. Just finishing bringing out all of that wonderful detail. Okay. There, we are done with that background. Super happy with that. Love the icy colors, and I enjoyed adding the mica crayon after. Next, we're going to pull in our second piece of cardstock. We have the one with the acorns on it, and we're going to be changing up our color palette. We're pulling in some mustard seed. Then we have some of the spiced marmalade, a bit of evergreen boughs, and some rustic wilderness, and a dash of lumberjack plaid. So this is going to be our fall palette. Oh, and we also have a dash of frayed burlap. So with these colors, we're going to be creating a more fall autumn background. And I'm just opening up all my jars because this time we are going to be painting with glazes, which means I'm going to want everything ready because I'm going to be using this like a paint palette and just dipping into each jar and taking a little pinch to color in different sections of the card base. So we're just going to open everything up, and I'll have that ready to go. I love seeing all the colors lined up together. That is such a great fall combination. Now we just need to add the embossing ink, and we'll be ready to go. So let's put the rest of this on fast forward. let's take a closer look at these finished panels. Here's the first one where we just did glazes and a dash of mica crayon, and here we did finger painting with glazes, and we used some scorched timber to bring out the details of the embossing. So happy with the results of these, and we've also used a touch of unraveled for some added sparkle. I love doing backgrounds like this. So fun, so easy. Now let's move on to our next technique. For the next technique we're going to be pulling in a very cool and spooky stamp set. Spooky Spirits, CMS 492, Stampers Anonymous, and Tim Holtz. Okay, those ghosts are fantastic. This is the year of the ghostie, so I had to include these in my technique catalog. So, ghosts are kind of spooky, and they need the spookiest glaze that we have, which would be the shaded lilac, which kind of has a bit of an ethereal, spiritual look to it. So, I'm also going to be using some vellum for our stamping. The vellum is going to be nice and translucent, and that's going to pair beautifully with the shaded lilac for a kind of ethereal, spectral look. So I'm picking the ghosts that I want, and I've got my clear stamping block nearby. Again, we're bringing in the embossing dabber, and we're just going to tap over the top of the little ghosts, and then I'll be able to stamp this down onto the vellum. Now, the nice thing about the vellum is that when you stamp with embossing ink, you're going to know immediately if your image transferred, because the paper is going to go slightly even more transparent. So, good firm pressure, stamp, and let's take a look. As you can see, the paper is slightly more see-through where there was ink. So that means we are all good for inking. Now, I want to do a second ghost while we're here. So again, we'll just dab on the ink. I'm just doing a few tap, tap, taps. And then we'll stamp this one out too. Just put those two ghosts side by side, and then we can add some embossing powder right over the top. Okay, we've got our ghosts. I need to bring back my scrap paper. We need the jar of glaze. And we're just going to pour. Just like that. And we've got our ghosts ready to be embossed, and they already look great. And of course, we'll take that extra powder and tip that right back into the jar. There we go. So let's just bring the paper back, and we're going to give this a quick emboss. Now the vellum's a little bit floppier, so I need to give it just a little bit more support as we are embossing. And also with the vellum, I want to be careful that I don't accidentally start scorching paper, so I'm trying to be pretty quick and not spend too much time in any one spot, because the vellum is a lot thinner than the other papers we've been playing with today. Okay, and we have our ghosties. So we're going to be stamping out some more ghosts, and we're going to put the rest of this on fast forward as we create a whole flock of ghosts. So let's get started. Here are all of our ghosts, and the shaded lilac is fantastic. That is just the right thing for a ghostly look. Very happy with that, especially over some vellum. Now, let's recap all of the fun things that we have done today with glazes. To start with, we have labeled all of our glaze containers with some swatches so that we know exactly which colors we're reaching for. Then we dived into one of my favorite grungy Tim Holtz techniques. This is where we sprinkle out glaze on a ink-soaked paper with the embossing ink, and then we sprinkle the distressed glazes over the top, give it a really good flick. then come back, emboss, and then grunge it up with some distress crayon. In this case, we used a dash of scorched timber to get some fantastic grunge. After, we were able to use some of the texture paste, Crackle Opaque, to get this super cool shattered glass look. And check out all of that wonderful detail. And we did a little bit of finger painting with glazes to get this really neat mosaic look. After, we played with some distress glazes over the top of embossed papers. Here are the results. This one was over damask, and we just did a little bit of finger painting and a little bit of added texture with some distress mica crayon. And look at this beautiful icy background. Absolutely loving that. Then we did some more finger painting with glazes and created this fun fall panel. And to get some of this grunge added back in here, we used a dash of unraveled mica crayon in order to bring out more of that fantastic detail. And the last technique we did was stamping with embossing powders, which is where we got all of these fun ghosts from the Tim Holtz stamp set CMS 492 Spooky Spirits. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the Crafty Corner for all of this fun with glaze. Until next time, happy crafting!